Welcome to the new and improved ConfigureITDone Podcast. The ConfigureITDone Podcast is now a place where we interview senior thought leaders in the SAP space across Australia and New Zealand, and the aim is to tap into their knowledge so we can pass on their insights to the listening SAP community. Please subscribe to the podcast and like, share and comment across Castos, YouTube, Apple Podcasts or Spotify.
This podcast is in partnership with the Black Dog Institute, who aim to create a mentally healthier world for everyone. If you wish to donate to the cause, please click the link below.
Welcome to the ConfigureITDone podcast. Today we have the wonderful Anthea Arnol with us. We have known Anthea since late 2019 when she was referred to me by Roshni Stokes, who was a very valued client of ours as well. And I placed Anthea over at Endeavour Energy as the S4HANA change manager there when they were doing a large transformation project. And since then, we've gone on to place Anthea at two other clients, and her current client is now, which is SAP Australia. So we know Anthea very well, we trust Anthea, and we're very excited to have you today. So welcome.
Thanks, Abby. Really happy to be here and to catch up with you again.
Yeah, of course. Me too. It's all good. So as I said, we're going to have a bit of a pub chat today. So we'll talk a little bit about your career, sort of where you've come from, your experiences and things that have shaped you into sort of the change manager that you are today, I suppose. And then we'll go on to things that you're really passionate about. So tell us a little bit about yourself, Anthea.
No problems, Abby. So as you would know, having interviewed me for my very first role at Precision, I'm a registered industrial psychologist and I specialise in change management. What you may not know about me is that I actually started out in forensic psychology before I moved to industrial psychology. However, after a few rather scary placements during my master's in forensics, I ended up transferring over to industrial. So the scary placements during forensics, I might leave for another podcast, maybe a true crime podcast.
Maybe a glass of wine podcast.
A glass of wine and a true crime podcast. But yes, I did start out in forensics, but now I am an industrial organisational psychologist. So for those that aren't aware, that is the study of people at work. So looking at everything from learning and development, outplacement, career guidance, assessments, change management, recruitment, and organisational restructures, all of those aspects of working with people in an organisation.
It's interesting because people, obviously I work with people in my day-to-day job as well, and I think that we are extremely interesting. So yes, I love that you've specialised your career into that. So tell us a little bit about your career then. Like, where did you start off in your first change management role?
Sure. So I'll probably start with my role with actually my first work with SAP. I started with SAP probably before I started in change management, and that was after probably about 10 years of consulting. I won't age myself terribly, but it was when Coopers and Lybrand was called Coopers and Lybrand. So I did about 10 years of consulting, and then I worked for New South Wales Police. I worked in the assessment unit, and yes, I could not keep away from the crime angle. I went back to to my crime roots. And what I did there was I worked in the assessment unit and promotions and selections. But one of the things that I was tasked to do was to analyse data from SAP, a very old version of SAP, I might say, but once again, always good because it's SAP. And what we would do is actually analyse the data from SAP against the crime stats. So having a look at SAP data, which was the HR metrics at the time, so exit interviews, looking at length of time people were in certain roles, and any other HR data that we had in SAP, comparing that against police metrics, and then looking at things such as turnover of probationers, promotion of women in the ranks, and looking at that data to see how we could implement and affect change. And that started my love of analytics, my love of change, and of SAP. And that's pretty much stuck with me today. So, yeah, it started out with New South Wales Police. I then worked with NYPD. So I did a secondment over to America. And I looked, whilst I was there, at the data systems that they had where they were using data across all of their various systems, crime stats, but also HR stats. Also, they looked at stats such as sick leave. They looked at stats in regards to critical incidents, etc. And they were using that to prevent suicide rates with their officers. And it was an amazing system that they had, and they would have these metrics that would identify people or officers at risk, and that information would go to the officer's next in charge, who was then required to talk to that officer and discuss any issues and concerns, etc. And they had a huge success in reducing the suicide rate of their police officers, which once again just, strengthened my love of analytics and data and what we could do with that data to help people in the workforce. It was amazing work that they were doing, and I was able to bring that back to New South Wales Police and the work that they were doing.
Incredible, isn't it? Because you wouldn't automatically think suicide prevention and data analytics, right? They wouldn't come hand in hand, but what an amazing thing to be a part of.
It really was. It was after a lot of the challenges they had after 9/11. They did have a very high suicide rate of their police officers, unfortunately, and they found that this was a very successful way of preventing the suicides by identifying the risk factors early. It was an amazing program they had in place, and really successful.
How long did you spend in the NYPD?
So it wasn't a huge secondment. It was about a month that I spent over in America, and I also spent time in North Carolina. I spent time with the state Bureau of Investigation over there. I also spent time with various law enforcements over in North Carolina, and also with some of the jails as well. So it was a really interesting time, and met some very interesting people. And
You were at New South Wales Police for quite a few years, weren't you?
I was. So after New South Wales Police, I then moved over to what was then called New South Wales Business Link, which is the shared services provider for family and community services. I looked after the promotions and recruitment for, docs, ageing and disability, home care, Aboriginal home care, etc. Had a really great recruitment team there of about 70 people, probably one of the best recruitment teams I've ever looked after. But we also did some really great innovations. We implemented the e-recruitment system Taleo when we were there, and we had started the SAP Implementation program, which is also another time when I got my love of SAP again. And that was just one of the times when a great opportunity came up for me, which was to move across to Transport for New South Wales and to not only head up one of the HR departments there in the shared services area, but also to be the SME for the HR component for their SAP implementation, which was, I think at the time, the largest SAP implementation in Australasia, which was about a 5-year implementation across 35,000 FTE for the whole of the transport cluster, which was, an amazing opportunity, an amazing SAP implementation.
Yeah, of course. So I think you keep coming back to saying how much you enjoy SAP. What is it about SAP that you like, sort of in comparison to other projects or sort of areas you've worked in?
Look, I've worked across quite a lot of data systems, Ellipse, Rooyen. I've worked on Salesforce and various versions of SAP. It's just the way that it holds the information together in a sensible way that you can go and collate the data. As I mentioned, look, I am a data nerd, and I like the way that, you can do everything from, your HR to your finance to your procurement, your asset management. It holds it all together in a way that you can then have that end-to-end. It breaks down the silos. You've got the ability to analyze that data and hold it in a way that makes it fairly easy for organizations to have good data, to report on their data, and to be able to then use that for predictive information, as well as just for doing their day-to-day work. It's not an easy system. I'm not going to say, look, this is a really straightforward, simple system. It is a system that does require a good understanding of how it works, but once it's implemented and implemented well, it does amazing things for an organization. And it really is just one of those systems that I'm always amazed by.
And so what do you think is the best implementation that you've worked on then?
Oh, I guess it depends on what you say, what you would call best, because best is all relative. I would say
enjoy the most.
Enjoy the most. I'd say enjoy the most is the current one that I'm doing. I am working for Christchurch City Council over in New Zealand. And I have to say the energy, the positivity, the culture, and the way that they are embracing change as a component of their program is one that I've never seen before. And as a change practitioner, that is something that we look for every day. And I've not worked on a program where change has had such a positive seat at the table. That is what I am loving. And that is what I'm finding is just making such a difference in regards to the way that the program is being implemented. In regards to challenging, the one at Endeavour Energy was challenging because it was run almost completely during COVID. So it was, the whole program, everything from SIT and UAT through to all of our training, through to our implementation and the design and development was all done in isolation. And that was really the first time that I had worked on one like that. And, we trained about 1,500 people remotely, which for a blue collar organization that were still learning to use iPads and iPhones, etc., that was just an amazing achievement. So I'm really proud of that implementation, and I'm really proud of the work that was done there. Was it fun? I wouldn't say it was fun. I would say, though, it was a great achievement for what we did under the circumstances. And it was a great team, a really, really great team who worked their little butts off.
Yeah, definitely. It was a bit of a tumultuous time, wasn't it? Didn't know whether it was all going to implode or whether it was going to continue. But I think if I look back now, some of my clients, Endeavour Energy was definitely the client that just continued with it and didn't seem to stop. And, there was I think there was about a 2-week hiccup where everybody panicked a bit when everybody went into lockdown. But after that, it just continued. So it's really good to see.
Yeah, and I think that's a testament to that particular team. They didn't stop. They kept going. And when COVID, everyone went into lockdown, so many SAP programs stopped. And Endeavour just said, no, we're going to do this. And they did. And to their credit, they implemented it, and they implemented it effectively. And I think a lot of organisations were looking to Endeavour to see how they were doing it. And I think, hats off to them. It was not easy, but they did it, and they did it successfully.
Definitely. I think one of the things about Endeavour, just sort of sticking on that point quickly, is that they did make change an important part of the programme. And a lot of our clients, we sort of try and consult with them and say, hey, look, change is really important. You've got to get that right from the start, and you've got to make sure that it's really ingrained in the business, particularly in these large implementations. As a change practitioner yourself, do you see that? Do you sort of come in sometimes and see that change is a bit of an afterthought and you have to catch up? Or have you found in your career that mostly change has sort of been really important?
It's a really good point. And I think it depends on the organisation, and it depends on the culture of the organisation and the change maturity of the organisation. Endeavour is a great example. There were various, I guess what you would call waves or various releases, and each release had a different sponsor and a different, leadership for those releases. And the success of those releases really did come down a lot to those sponsors and the way the sponsors led that release. And when you look at the success of any program, and SAP programs in particular, you've got, your classic, and I'm going to have to talk about ProSci, your classic ProSci change triangle. You have to have the 3 seats at the table. You have to have project management, which is, the technical side of the change, which is, your design, development, delivering the actual solution. So that's the actual project itself.
Yeah.
But you have to have leadership and you have to have sponsorship. And that is just as important. And that is the governance and the direction. That is actually guiding, supporting, and making sure that you have the right people saying the right things and supporting and directing the program and making key decisions and actions. And that is as equally important as the project management. Change management is that third piece of that triangle, equally important as project management and leadership and sponsorship. And if it doesn't have a seat at the table, your people are not going to adopt the system. They are not going to understand what change means to them. They're not going to be enabled. They're not going to understand and be able to adapt to the solution. So you need those three pieces. You need the project management, which is the actual system design and implementation. You need the leadership and the sponsorship to guide and direct and support. And then you need change management to bring the people on the journey, because they will be using the system. Because otherwise you've got a bright new system that's shiny and pretty and no one is going to use it. So you need those three elements. And without that, you just don't set your project up for success.
And you'd be surprised by the amount of times that we've seen change management be an absolute afterthought. And so, yeah, there's millions have been spent on implementing this, pretty beautiful functioning SAP system, but people don't use it. So pointless. So what do you think is, obviously we kind of touched on it briefly there, but what do you think is really key to success in change management?
I think you touched on it before as well by saying, change management can often be an afterthought. And one of the things that people can say is, change management's just training. All you've got to do is train people. That's all you've got to do. But, the research is saying that your formal training is only about 10% of what you actually need for the success to actually make it so that people are upskilled and are able to undertake the new role and responsibilities. So probably for me, there's a couple of things that you need for that success. And one of them is understanding that difference between, it's just training, but also making sure that you've got the informal learning in place, which is, your change agents, your peer network, making sure they've got that support from management. They know exactly what they need to do. And then also on the job. So they need that on the job support, the coaching, your SMEs, the guides, the in-system help. Where can they go to get that support? Because that makes up about 70% of the actual learning that they need to be able to do it. So when you get those throwaway lines of, we just got to do some formal training, just run them through training, they'll be fine. That is just such a small component of setting people up for success in regards to them being able to use and adopt and be successful in that new system. And to me, that's one of the things is not just educating people, but educating the business and the project team in it's not just training that we've got to do for people.
Yeah, of course. It's got to be done right from the start, right? And
very much so. It's a journey.
It's a journey, yeah. It's a psyche change as well, right? If I think about in our business when we brought on a new database a few years ago, and I'd spent years using our other database, and all of a sudden I was expected to use this new system, and I'm a dinosaur. I don't understand how to use new systems, right? So yes, I can understand where it comes from, definitely.
And you won't get it, and you won't get it first go. So you'll have
it took me
a
about
lot
100 goes.
Very much so. So go live, you'll have a lot of people who perhaps will go backwards in their performance. They'll go backwards in their time taken to do tasks. And you need to allow for that. And you need to understand that's part of the process, because it's that learning curve, and you've got to allow them that time and give them that support so that they can learn and they can get upskilled. And that's also a really big part of that.
Yeah, of course. So what areas are you most passionate about? I know we kind of touched on it slightly, but what makes you tick?
Okay, what makes me tick? Change management has so many different areas and so many different aspects that make up success. One of the areas that I am very passionate about is the importance of feedback. And feedback really scares a lot of people. And we're going through it at the moment with the current project that I'm working on. And I see it every day that people are afraid of that feedback. And I can understand and I can really empathize with that. And I guess to give an example, in my spare time, I show quarter horses. And to put some perspective on that, when I first started in my current discipline of showing quarter horses, I would never look at the judges' scorecards. I never wanted to see them. I would get my placings, and then I would go back to my trailer and I would mutter to myself, well, the judge doesn't know what they're doing. Someone in the crowd made a noise, there was a barking dog or something, put my horse off, all of that. And then I would go back the next show and do things exactly the same way, expecting a different result. And I would just keep going back and back and back. And after a while, I thought, well, this isn't working. So I got the courage up. Exactly right. I got the courage up, and I went and I got the judges' scorecards, and I put my big girl pants on, and I started to read the judges' score sheets. And oh my gosh, there was so much information. I found out the judge was saying we were too slow in our trot. We stopped past the marker. We didn't complete our turns. Things I was not aware of, things I did not know I was doing. But also the judge loved our canter. The judge loved our canter transitions. There were things the judge loved. It's like, wow, okay, that's really great. So what I now had was constructive things to work on. I could practice at home. I knew exactly what I was needing to focus on, and then I could improve on my next show. And surprisingly, we started to do better. And it was like, okay, that's really starting to click. And it's the same for any SAP program. Looking at the feedback, getting the feedback, whether it be pulse surveys, whether it be ADCAR surveys, whether it be lessons learned, you've got to put your big girl pants on and say, okay, what are the people really saying? Don't take it personally. Don't say, well, they weren't there. They didn't know how hard we worked. They should try and give it a go. Put all of that aside and go, yes, but what do they think we did well? And what do they think we could do better? And that's what you need to really put that focus on for next time, because chances are you will either have another program within that organization, or you will be moving to another program in another organization, and you take all that valuable feedback with you. Don't put it in a drawer. Don't lock it away for no one else to see. Take it out and go, what are we going to do about it? What are the actions we're going to do? Who's going to action these? Make it constructive, make it useful. Feedback is so important, but you have to be brave, and it's scary.
We have a saying internally at Precision that my boss Simon loves to throw around. It's feedback makes you bitter or better, and it's because we're pretty good at giving feedback internally, right? But it can be confronting. I think as humans we like to know what we're doing well at and shy away from what we're doing not so well at. I'm a prime person for that. So doing that in a whole program where you're putting your blood, sweat and tears to it is confronting, but it's important, right? So.
I totally agree, and people can take it personally, and it's really hard not to. And our role in change is to make sure that we gather the right information from the right people in the right way, that we analyze it, and that we feed it back in the right way, so that you don't offend people, that you don't give people, information that is going to upset and hurt them, but that you also give them actions and information that's useful, because, that's part of our role in change, is how do we gather that information, how do we analyze it, and how do we make that program better? And that's not easy. That is hard to take them on that journey.
Of course. Yeah, it really is. And I think I remember you did really well with that at Endeavour Energy. There was a lot of that, wasn't there? And particularly given it was all remote, as you said, right? It's a new way of working for the world. So
and there's so many things you can learn from that. And, it can, as you said, it can only make you better.
Yes, exactly. But it's about teaching everyone how they do that, right? So, yes. Well, look, I think that's good. I think we've covered a lot of ground there. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
Probably the other thing that I'm quite passionate about is data and analytics, being a data nerd. In change management, one of the things that is also sometimes overlooked is the importance of data, and it is your friend in change management. We're constantly collecting data from change impact assessments, learning needs analysis, stakeholder analysis, feedback assessments, business utilization, etc. It's what we then do with that information and how we use that. So, for example, in the program that I'm working on at the moment, we have gone live with self-service requisitioning, and we're looking at the data to see, okay, who is now using the new system and how are they using it? Who's taking perhaps too long to approve purchase orders, etc. And then assessing that against, have they done training? Have they watched the videos in regards to training? And if we're seeing a trend or seeing some correlations there, that gives us some actions. Okay, that's some people who perhaps need some training, or maybe that's a division that needs some extra training. So we're looking at that data and saying, well, what is that data telling us about adoption of the new system? It's not, we've gone live, great, let's move on to the next project. It's, let's look at the business benefits. Are they being realised? And we need to have data to be able to do that. And that's where you can start to correlate and analyse the data that you've got, both within the system, but also through, surveys. And thankfully, SAP have some great survey tools. So I'm a little spoiled.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, it's horrendously important, right? Because it all boils down to using the system and using it correctly. SAP is not a cheap product, right? Where they're not racing to the bottom. They're not trying to be the cheapest out there, but they are very detailed and can cover everything, as you said, right? So if you're not using it properly, it's kind of futile.
Well, that's it. And to get the business benefits, you want to make sure people aren't going back to their old ways of doing things. You want to make sure that they're using
Which is easily done.
Very much so. So it's not about making sure they know how to do things. So have they been trained? Are they actually supported? But are they also doing things correctly? Are they using the new processes, etc.? Or are they struggling? And that's where you look at things like time taken. So you can actually, analyze some of those things and really look to see whether those benefits are being realized.
All righty. Well, look, thank you so much for your time today. It was wonderful to chat to you and to see you again. And I look forward to sharing this all across LinkedIn, and please feel free to share it too.
It's been a pleasure as always, Abby.
All righty. Thanks, Anthea.
Cheers.
Please like, share, comment and subscribe to the ConfigureITDone podcast.